Somebody in the news in all this mortgage crisis business, Adam?
Joined with Representative Barney from the House Banking Committee. He's chairman of the House Banking Committee, a man who understands the mortgage meltdown and credit crunch just about better than anyone in Washington, D.C. Congressman Frank, thank you for joining us first on Fox with this exclusive interview. And my question to you is, you are seeing a huge number of people here in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, turning out for foreclosure relief, more than they anticipated, with 3 to 4 more hours to go. What does that say about where we are in this housing crisis?
Well, we knew we had a serious crisis. You're going to look at the numbers. And by the way, you're right. And in fact, you're slightly understated, because there are people here from Rhode Island. We're not far from Rhode Island in this part of Massachusetts. And there are people from other states as well. It's being done to its credit by the Boston Regional Federal Reserve. What it shows you is that there are a large number of people who are more willing to make the effort to save their homes than people thought. There are people who have said, well, you know, the problem is that we're ready to help them, but we can't hear from them. Well, people get intimidated by calling a line and being told, well, push 1, push 2, wait 3 hours, etc. The turnout is great, and it is an indication of the extent to which people do want to protect their homes and preserve their homes, and aren't just making the economic calculation, well, I owe more than the property's worth, I'm walking away. I think this shows that you really have people out there who want to keep their homes.
You know, you see all these empty seats in the stadium behind us. You could fill this stadium 16 times, 1,100,000 foreclosures right now in the United States, and yet Sheila Bair from the FDIC says the banks, the mortgage originators and servicers aren't moving fast enough to modify loans. Is there anything that Congress can do to kickstart that, or get these people to move faster to help the over 1,200 who've come here today, with more on the way?
Well, Sheila Bair has been very constructive, and she's been one of the regulators, a Bush appointee, who has been out front in saying that. We did pass the bill finally. I was frustrated. We passed in the House the bill months earlier. You've unfortunately got the situation in the Senate where you need 60 votes to do something, not 51, and a couple of Republican senators, frankly, decided to obstruct for reasons unrelated to the housing crisis. They ultimately relented. So we've passed the bill. Now, it doesn't take effect till October 1st. But I give credit to Secretary of HUD Preston, who has promised us, along with Sheila Bair and others, that they're going to be ready to go on October 1st with this. We've got a new set of arrangements that will facilitate a mortgage rewriting. There's no tax money involved. Basically, we say to the people who hold the mortgages, if you will accept less, and you get to a number that the person who mortgaged home can now make, will help by getting an FHA guarantee. So you have to accept less. But once you've accepted that less, you'll be able to know that that's where it is. You'll have some stability. That's ready October 1st. Essentially, our challenge to the servicers is get ready. And even though this isn't legally available till October 1st, nothing says you have to evict people now and foreclose now. Wait till October 1st and be ready on October 1st to take advantage of this. And this is, frankly, a test to the people who hold the mortgages, the servicers. They've told us they want to cooperate. Now they're going to get us a chance to show us that.
Now, Congress has put up a great deal of money, but the key to this, too, is having Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in place to help assist. And just a report the other day in regards to Fannie Mae, that their purchase of those, what I would call regular middle-class types of mortgages, they're diminishing that and trying to go for some of the larger mortgages.
There will be a problem with this, because what we are talking about here will be mortgages that get a guarantee from the FHA. Okay. So from the standpoint of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, there's no risk whatsoever in buying FHA guaranteed mortgages. So again, the way this plan works is, well, there are two aspects of the FHA. First, thanks to the leadership of Chairman Barney of the Federal Reserve, because the House passed a bill and the Senate didn't, the kind of subprime mortgages that got people in trouble, both the lenders and the borrowers, won't be happening in the future. The Federal Reserve has put some good rules in effect that says, very complicated, don't lend people money that they don't have. Don't lend people more money than the house is worth. We won't have this in the future. Instead, people will be able to go to the FHA, which gives you a 30-year mortgage after it makes sure that you can repay. Secondly, we've got the people who are already in a subprime situation facing foreclosure. If their lender, and we think there'll be hundreds of thousands of them, not everybody by any means, if your lender now says, okay, we'll take less, if we can be guaranteed that at least we'll get that less, that then goes to the FHA. So what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will be doing in the future, unlike in the past, is being able to buy a much higher percentage of mortgages that are already guaranteed by the FHA.
But what I was asking in regards to Fannie and Freddie is, in the non-subprime category, in the more traditional mortgages, we're starting to see the kind of, I don't want to say collapse on the scale of subprime, but we're seeing people in traditional prime mortgages get into trouble. And will they be able, in October, November, December, to go the traditional route for help?
There's a problem. We have, and one of the things we have to look at going forward, you know, there was a front-page article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago attacking the head of Freddie Mac because he bought too many of those mortgages. So they really are, in fairness to them, in a situation where they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. They have shareholders and they have a public mission. What we are trying to do is to provide enough support in the market in general so they will be able to go forward. And yes, I hope they will go forward. And that's one reason why I was very pleased that we raised the level of mortgage they can guarantee, because frankly those are less likely to get into trouble. So we do have to work with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and yes, they have a role to play. Again, I would say that by giving them a higher level of mortgages in part to be able to buy, not in substitution for, but in addition to the others, and by giving them a much higher percentage of FHA guarantees, going forward, they should be in better shape, and we will be expecting them to participate in the whole market.
So you're a busy man, so let me conclude this with a question for you. Next year, new administration, will the next Treasury Secretary be writing a check for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Should we nationalize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to avoid the kinds of problems we're in now down the road and to bail out the system now before we get into more trouble?
No, I think nationalizing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac now would be very unwise. I doubt very much that the next Treasury Secretary will have to write a check. The current Treasury Secretary doesn't think so. I really do believe that what we saw was a market overreaction, and I think that's been somewhat established by the fact that once we said that there would be some authority, it hasn't had to be used. And again, I want to stress, looking backwards, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and everybody else, this isn't peculiar to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they've survived this housing crisis better than a lot of other institutions, countrywide, to take one very blatant example. If you're in the housing business, you've had troubles. As you look at what we have done with the FHA and in other ways, the likelihood is that going forward they will have a better quality of mortgage to buy. I believe that we will be able to get through this, if of course it's a psychological factor. And once we have gotten through this and we get into next year, yes, I think the time will come when we will say, does this particular hybrid public-private mechanism make sense? But trying to change it in the midst of all this would not be a good idea.
But what I heard you just say is that down the road we should look at perhaps recreating the Fannie Freddie.
It's made some great discovery. I am sorry to interfere with your exclusive, but I've been saying that for some time. Yes, down the road we will have to decide whether or not this makes sense. But to talk about doing it now in the midst of some turmoil, I think it's as much a psychological thing as not, is a problem. But I don't understand why you pounce when I
pounce because it's so rare I get to talk to you, and I'm so honored to do it. But my question would be, when do we hit bottom? When do you think we'll hit bottom and get to that point?
Well, I want to go back. The question of how better to do Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is obviously on the table. Look, we had a degree of meltdown in the housing field that nobody or very few people foresaw. Again, if you look at this, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have, in my judgment, survived it better than a lot of other institutions, some of which have disappeared. Bear Stearns, subprime, had a part to do with this, Northern Rock in England. I am hoping that with the combination of things we've done in the legislation, and I want to stress again, one of the things that we've done, and I give the Federal Reserve under Ben Bernanke credit, there won't be a repetition of this. People can say, well, you've solved this problem, or you've responded to this problem, not solved it. How do we know it won't happen again? Because we have outlawed the kind of bad mortgages that led to this problem, and that's going to be very helpful.
Frank, I really appreciate your talking with us and giving me a hard rap, so thank you very much, sir. Have a safe trip back to Washington at the end of the summer.
Thank you.
Back to you in New York.